You can buy the whole world with money, but can you ever buy the truth? On an early autumn evening in Denver, when the city lights shimmered across rain-soaked streets, a man quietly stepped into one of the most luxurious restaurants in America. Ashcroft Prime. No one noticed him. They had no reason to. He looked like just another weary laborer coming off a late shift. A denim jacket frayed at the shoulders, an old shirt wrinkled jeans and worn-down leather shoes. But no one knew. He was Ethan Carter, the very man who owned the restaurant they were dining in. One of the wealthiest men in America. Ethan hadn't come for the $1,000 steak. He didn't need vintage wine or a dessert plated in gold. Tonight he was searching for something far rarer. The truth long buried beneath flawless reports and carefully practiced smiles. Every few months he left behind the glass-walled office at the top of Ashcroft Tower, put on an unfamiliar identity, and walked into one of his restaurants. No announcements, no assistants, no Armani suit. Just a man with tired eyes and a heart still hungry for honesty. The hostess gave him a seasoned look, a quick up-and-down glance as if to figure out whether he'd wandered into the wrong place. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" she asked, her voice flat pressing on the word, sir. "No," Ethan replied with a faint smile. "Just a table for one. Anywhere is fine." A thin, papery smile flickered across her face. "I can seat you near the kitchen. We're quite full tonight." Of course it wasn't nearly that full. Ethan nodded without expression. She led him across a glowing sea of candlelight and wine glasses past elegant couples and businessmen in $1,000 suits. No one looked up. No one greeted him. They drifted past him as though he were smoke. Table 17, near the kitchen door, next to the linen cart. Every clang of pans, every barked order from the chefs poured straight into his ears. Perfect. Just what he needed. He sat down and began to watch. The rhythm of the waiter's steps, the manager's ingratiating laugh with regulars, the bartender's lazy eyes. All things financial reports could never reveal. 15 minutes passed. Not a soul asked for his order. He understood clearly now in this place, your appearance decided how worthy you were of service. And then she appeared, a young woman with light brown hair pulled back neatly, wearing a faded server's uniform. Her eyes were large, shadowed by sleepless nights, but carrying something real, kindness. She approached with a basket of bread in her hands, bowed slightly, and spoke in a voice soft yet steady. "Good evening. My name's Claire. I'll be serving your table tonight. Would you like to start with water, or maybe a beer?" Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze, eyes that seemed to hold untold stories. And in that instant, he realized this wasn't just another test. This was a turning point. "Water, please." "Thank you," he answered, watching her as she turned gracefully, walking away without rush, without condescension. She didn't see the wrinkled clothes, didn't judge the weary man before her. She treated him just like anyone else. Ethan exhaled a long breath. In this room filled with glitter and pretense, he had finally found a flicker of truth, something small yet enough to stir his frozen heart. His eyes dropped to Claire's shoes, scuffed black work shoes worn nearly to the sole, not the kind anyone wore for show, shoes that had carried her through thousands of weary steps for reasons greater than herself. He glanced once more around the room, the swirling wine glasses, the hollow flirtations, the polished laughter, yet his thoughts stayed only on Claire. Who was this girl, and what had carved such depth into someone so young? He didn't know yet, but he had a feeling. Tonight would not end with just a bill. It would end with a revelation. Claire returned with a glass of water in hand. She set it down so gently that it made no sound against the table. The soft smile lingered at the corners of her lips, but her eyes, they were different, deeper distant, as if holding something unspoken. Ethan gave her a small nod. "Thank you." She returned it politely and walked away. No unspoken question about why he hadn't ordered wine. No flicker of doubt about whether he could afford the meal. Unlike everyone else in this restaurant, Claire didn't view him through the lens of money. He observed her from a distance. Claire didn't glide around like the other servers, but there was a natural grace in her every movement. She didn't smile because she had been trained to. She smiled because she believed in kindness. That alone made her stand out in a room too polished, too fake. Then Ethan began to notice the smaller details. Her shoes, heels worn down, patched with crude hand stitches. Her apron, faded along the folds. Her sleeves, carefully mended with white thread that didn't quite match. This wasn't neglect. It was proof of someone battling life every single day, yet still keeping herself neat out of respect for her work. Claire came back with the menu in hand. "Would you like to see our dinner menu?" she asked. "Of course," Ethan replied. "But maybe you could tell me about tonight's specials." "Yes," Claire said, and her eyes brightened just a little, as if being trusted was a rare gift. "Tonight we have oven-roasted prime rib wild mushroom risotto and the most special dish, the heritage cut, a 90-day dry-aged steak served with truffle and foie gras." Ethan flipped the menu lightly, and just as he expected, the heritage cut cost $490, a dish not meant for anyone in denim. "That sounds perfect," he said with a faint smile. "I'll take that." Claire froze for a moment. Her gaze flicked briefly to his cracked shoes, then back to his calm, steady face. She didn't sneer, but it was clear she was weighing the moment. In a heartbeat, a wave swept through her chest. Did he know what he had just ordered? Or was this a joke, some hidden camera prank, or just a fantasy? A man who looked anything but wealthy had just ordered the most expensive item on the menu, and then their eyes met. Ethan didn't look away. He wasn't trying to play a role. His gaze was steady, thoughtful, waiting for her judgment. Claire drew in a deep breath, and in that moment, she made a choice. "Yes, sir." "A perfect choice," she said, her gentle smile returning. "Would you like a wine pairing with that? Could you choose one for me?" "Well," she hesitated, then dared. "I'd recommend the 2006 Cabernet. Bold, but an excellent match." "Then I'll trust your choice." Claire wrote it down and walked away, her heart pounding. She knew full well, if that man couldn't pay, the manager would never let it go. That steak alone was nearly half her monthly wage. One wrong decision could cost her everything. She passed by the wine counter, and as she expected, the manager, Thomas Green, had already noticed. The man in the navy suit, slicked back hair, and a smile colder than dry ice was staring straight at her. She knew exactly what awaited her after this shift. But still, no regrets. Because in the stranger's eyes, Claire had seen something rare, a sense of fairness. For once, she wasn't just a waitress. She was a person worth trusting. Ethan sat quietly watching her again, and he felt something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in a very long time. Respect, not for power, not for wealth, but simply for being human. He looked down at the white tablecloth, at the tiny flame of the candle flickering before him, and knew tonight would not be like the other tests. This would be the beginning of something far greater. Claire gently pushed open the staff door. Inside, the harsh white glare of fluorescent lights struck her eyes, bouncing off chipped tiles. Gone was the soft music, gone was the aroma of fine food. Only the sharp scent of cleaning chemicals and the heavy weight of pressure remained. She walked to the POS system, her hands trembling slightly as she entered the order. The heritage cut with a 2006 Cabernet. The total flashed on the screen, $526 before tax. Her breath caught. She knew the system would immediately send an alert to the manager's computer. And just as if following a script she already knew too well, Thomas Green appeared like a cold storm. He looked at no one but her. "Claire." "Yes." She turned, forcing her voice steady. "What did table 17 just order?" Claire straightened her back. The heritage cut and a glass of Cabernet. Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Are you sure that man understands what he's ordering?" "He seemed to understand perfectly," she said softly but firmly. "Claire." He stepped closer, his voice hissing like a snake. "He's wearing cracked shoes sitting near the kitchen. No reservation. And you just let him order nearly $600 worth of food. Are you out of your mind?" "I don't think it's my place to judge a guest by their clothes," Claire replied. Thomas let out a bitter laugh. It wasn't amusement. It was menace. He leaned in closer. "Do you remember the inventory discrepancy last month? That little shortage I haven't forgotten." Claire's throat went dry. Thomas whispered, "I could report you for stealing that $300 bottle of wine, or maybe falsifying an order. With that stain on your record, you'd never work in a restaurant in Denver again." She swallowed hard, not because she feared for her reputation, but because of her brother. Lucas, 17 years old, at home with a ventilator, end-stage cystic fibrosis. Their mother's insurance had expired last year. Every month, Claire scraped together over $2,000 for hospital bills, medication, respiratory equipment, and specialist visits. Any interruption in that flow of money could be a death sentence. Thomas knew this, and he used it against her. He continued, his tone oily now. "But I'm a generous man. You could repay me by working a few extra shifts. Help me with inventory. After hours." Claire clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms until they stung. "That order?" Thomas flicked his eyes to the POS screen. "If he can't pay, you know who's taken the fall, don't you?" "I understand," she said, her eyes fixed straight ahead. He stared at her for another long moment, then turned away, leaving behind a shadow as suffocating as oil. Claire stood frozen, her heart pounding violently. She had lived under Thomas's shadow for 3 months now. He had threatened, cornered, demanded explanations for phantom discrepancies he himself created. She knew she was being set up, but there was no way to prove it. And if she lost her job, Lucas would lose his chance to survive. No one knew that Claire had once studied accounting and finance at the state university. She had dropped out in her junior year after her mother's sudden death, the same year Lucas was diagnosed. Now, the very knowledge she once hoped to build her future on was being exploited by Thomas. He forced her to clean up his books, legalize fake inventory, adjust, falsified invoices, cover suspicious imports. She had been turned into an unwilling accomplice. Her plan had been to endure just a few more months, until Lucas's next treatment stabilized, until some miracle happened. But then the man at table 17 walked in. Unlike the other guests, he hadn't pulled out a phone to photograph his food. He hadn't scrutinized the people around him. He simply observed, quiet, patient, and most of all, he treated her like a person. At first, she thought it was just a fleeting feeling, a brief spark in a long night. But when their eyes met as he ordered, she realized it was something more, an invitation to trust, that she, standing on the edge of despair, might dare to place her hope in a stranger, because he saw her. Truly saw her? A dangerous thought flickered in her mind, a reckless idea. What if he wasn't just an ordinary man? What if he was someone with power, someone who could change things? Maybe, just maybe, he was her only way out. Claire wiped her sweaty palms quickly against her apron. She needed to find a way, a message, a signal. She couldn't speak it aloud, couldn't email, couldn't scribble on the check. She had to find a way to tell the truth without anyone noticing. Her eyes scanned the room, and then as they landed on the neatly stacked pile of linen napkins by the counter, the idea struck, destiny written in cloth. Claire returned to table 17 with more professionalism than ever. But inside she was a storm. Her steps were steady, the tray in her hand unwavering, but beneath that calm mask was fear twisting every nerve. "Thank you," Ethan said as she set the glass of Cabernet before him. "You chose well." Claire gave a polite nod. "Your entree will be out in about 12 minutes. Please relax." She turned away, hiding the quick gasp in her chest. There was no turning back now. While the kitchen prepared the most expensive steak on the menu, Claire slipped quietly into the linen storage at the end of the hall. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a crisp white napkin embroidered with the restaurant's logo, the kind reserved for VIP tables. From the pocket of her apron, she pulled a small pen, the only thing she had kept for herself. The tip pressed against the fabric. She hesitated. What words could say everything? In just a few lines. "You are being watched. The kitchen is not safe. Check Thomas's ledger. He is poisoning the supply chain." She stopped. The words sounded like something from a thriller novel. But if this man was who she hoped, she had to take the risk. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Lucas. At table 17, Ethan sipped his wine, his eyes sweeping the room. Everything felt too smooth, too rehearsed. The servers moved like actors on a stage. And the director was none other than Thomas Green, laughing at a VIP table as though the entire world belonged to him. Then Claire returned, this time carrying the heritage cut, plated like a masterpiece, perfectly seared dry-aged steak, topped with shaved truffle and a slice of sizzling foie gras. A dish only the ultra-rich dared order. A dish no man in a denim jacket should have before him. "Medium rare, just as requested," she said, placing the plate down. "Perfect," Ethan replied, but his eyes weren't only on the steak, they were on her. For just a moment their gazes locked. Only seconds yet, filled with something uncanny. Claire felt it too. He knew. He sensed something was wrong, and he was waiting for her to act. Time was running out. An hour later, dinner was over. Ethan set down his knife and fork, finishing the last sip of black coffee. No one came to bring the bill. No one asked him anything. The entire staff seemed to be waiting, watching, curious if the odd stranger could pay for the dish that cost more than their rent. Claire approached, the tray in her left hand, holding the bill, her right hand gathering his empty glass. She placed the tray on the table, as if everything were normal. Then, with the subtle skill of a magician, her left hand slid the folded napkin beneath the bill tray, her right hand lowering the tray just enough to cover it. The motion lasted less than a second. "Is there anything else you need?" she asked, her voice as light as air. Ethan shook his head. "Dinner was excellent. Thank you, Claire." "I'm glad to hear that," she said, turning to leave. But 3 steps away, his voice stopped her. "Claire," she froze. Her shoulders trembled, her heart hammered. She turned back, struggling to keep her face calm. Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the tray, more precisely, at the spot where the napkin had vanished. He lifted it slightly, but nothing was there. Then his eyes rose sharp as X-rays, piercing through her defenses. Claire understood instantly. In her panic, she had lifted the tray along with the napkin, all because of fear. She swallowed hard, her fists clenched. She had failed. That was supposed to be her one chance. She stood rooted in place, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. It felt as though the whole restaurant was spinning around her. And then, mustering the last of her courage, she stepped back to table 17. Without a word, she tilted the tray just enough to let the folded napkin fall back onto the table. "You forgot your tip," she whispered, her voice no louder than a breath. A terrible excuse, but the only one she could manage. She set the tray back down, avoiding his eyes, and walked away, trembling as if she had leapt from a rooftop without a parachute. Ethan watched her go. He understood everything, not from her words, not from her expression, but from the desperation tangled with resolve in her eyes. That wasn't a server asking for a tip. It was a plea for help, a silent alarm. He quietly laid his hand over the napkin. The fabric was thin, yet inside it carried the weight of something enormous, a truth powerful enough to topple an empire. And he knew tonight would not end here. Outside the restaurant, the wind had grown stronger, spinning golden leaves across the stone-paved walkway. Ethan stood beneath the street lamp, his hand clutching the folded white napkin. His heart pounded, not from the cold, but from the words now carved into his mind like a blade into wood. "You are being watched. The kitchen is not safe. Check Thomas's ledger. He is poisoning the supply chain." 4 sentences, 18 words, yet enough to set every nerve in his body on fire. Something terrible was happening inside his own empire. He read them again, no signature, no explanation, but he understood whoever wrote this wasn't asking for pity. They were warning him, like a messenger in the dark risking everything to tell the truth. Ethan walked quickly past rows of lit windows, silent as a ghost. He pulled out a phone, not his usual one, but a burner untraceable used only for nights like this when he vanished into anonymity. He dialed the only number saved inside. A deep, steady voice with a sharp British accent answered. "Arthur Pendleton speaking." "It's me." Ethan's voice was urgent but under control. "Good Lord, do you realize it's been weeks since you called this?" "Arthur, shut up and listen." Ethan stopped at a deserted corner of the park, the street lamps casting a blur as chaotic as his thoughts. "Something's happening at Ashcroft Prime. A server gave me a warning. About Thomas." Arthur fell silent, the way he always did when his mind began calculating. "Write this down," Ethan continued. "I need a full audit of financial history supplier, contracts, purchase ledgers, import records, especially anything connected to Thomas Green." Under his own name, or through shell companies, Arthur asked, "Both, and I need it tonight. No footprints. Use the outside forensic team we hired for the takeovers. Don't touch the internal system." "Understood." Arthur's tone shifted instantly into action mode. "And Arthur," Ethan hesitated, "the server's name is Claire. Look into her. Everything, but keep it discreet. If she's telling the truth, she's in danger." At 1 a.m. in an empty parking lot a few blocks from the restaurant, a black SUV without plates rolled silently to a stop. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, the napkin still clenched in his hand like a lifeline. The driver turned toward him, a woman with cropped hair, no makeup eyes like frozen steel. "I'm Ren," she said. Arthur said you needed a ghost. Security Ethan asked, testing her. Eonstasis, Elambors, MI6, retired, she answered without hesitation. I get into places before the system even knows I'm there. You need an infiltration. Thomas's office. Before dawn. Wren gave a curt nod. Level 2 security, code lock and motion sensors. If he's paranoid, there'll be private cameras too. Can we disable them? She smirked. You plan on coming with me? Ethan locked eyes with her. I won't send someone to do what I'm not willing to do myself. This is my company. If someone's poisoning it, I need to be the first to see the proof. Wren studied him for a beat, then gave a small, approving smile, then changed clothes. Tonight you're a janitor. At 2:10 a.m., Ethan pushed a cleaning cart toward the employee entrance of Ashcroft Prime, the very door he had walked through hours earlier, disguised as a poor diner. Now he returned not for a meal, but to unmask a traitor. Dressed in the uniform of Clear Tech Solutions, the contracted cleaning crew, he looked the part of a night janitor. Beside him, Wren scanned every shadow like a human motion detector. They slipped through the staff door, unlocked with a key card Wren had borrowed from the cleaning company's headquarters. Inside, she held up a device sweeping the office. Hidden cameras. 1, 2, 3. The lock, Ethan whispered. 4-digit code, probably a birthday, or incorporation date. Ethan's eyes landed on a framed photo. Thomas with his teenage soccer team. Jersey number 12. A trophy engraved 2017. He murmured, try 1207. Wren punched it in. Beep, beep, click. The door swung open. Inside a wall safe, a desktop computer and a locked filing cabinet. Wren plugged in a flash drive, copying the entire hard drive. Ethan tore through the filing cabinet, pulling out a black binder labeled Ledger G Supplier. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. Invoices from a meat plant shut down for food safety violations. Fake purchase orders. Markups of 600%. Every trail led to one name, Thomas Green. Ethan said nothing, but inside, something shifted forever. Trust. By 4 a.m. before dawn broke, Ethan walked out of Ashcroft Prime. His eyes were no longer weighed down with doubt. Now he carried the truth, and a promise began to form in his heart. Claire had risked everything to warn him. Now it was his turn to do the right thing. The Denver sky was beginning to turn pale silver as the first light of morning slipped through the city's high-rise towers. But inside the 47th floor office of Ashcroft Tower, Ethan Carter had not closed his eyes all night. Not because of business, but because of the truth he had just seen with his own eyes. On his desk lay the open black ledger from Thomas's office beside the flash drive Wren had copied. The evidence was no longer suspicion. It was crime, systematic, organized, deliberate. Arthur Pendleton, immaculate in his suit, but weary from his own sleepless night, combed through every page. Projected on the wall was a detailed breakdown of fake invoices, money trails, and most damning of all, a shell company. Westlake Supply. Shut down 7 months ago for gross food safety violations. And yet, the most recent invoice to Ashcroft Prime was 3 weeks old. Good God, Arthur muttered. He's been funneling tainted meat into our restaurants and selling it at 4 times the cost. Ethan finished, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The profit wasn't just from customers. Someone else was in on this. Arthur looked up. You think it's a larger network? Without question, Ethan nodded. Westlake couldn't operate alone. They were shut down, yet still had product. Still had paperwork, still had active accounts moving money. Thomas is just one link. But he chose to start with my flagship. Arthur studied him carefully. And Claire, is she involved? Ethan didn't answer right away. He pulled out his phone, opening the message Arthur had sent hours earlier. Claire Bennett's full background file. Age 23, 2 years of finance studies at the University of Colorado. Dropped out after her mother's sudden death and her younger brother's diagnosis. Mother deceased 3 years ago, father absent since childhood. Brother Lucas Bennett, 17 end-stage cystic fibrosis, treated at home. Medical expenses $300,000 annually. Claire is his legal guardian, works 3 jobs. Ethan stared at the file in silence, not because of the numbers, but because of the portrait it painted. A young woman fighting the world with one hand and still choosing to do the right thing. She's not just trustworthy, Ethan said slowly. She's the reason I started to suspect something was wrong at all. Arthur gave a solemn nod. So what's the next step? Ethan rose and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at a city still half asleep. In his mind, the plan was already clear. Call the FBI and the FDA. Tell them to coordinate. We deal with this today. Arthur lifted a brow. No time to prepare. No, if Thomas suspects anything, he'll wipe the evidence clean. We strike while he thinks he's safe. Ethan turned his eyes like steel. And I'll be there myself. 11:30 a.m. Ashcroft Prime. Thomas Green stood near the wine bar, smiling smugly as a group of VIP guests walked in. Last night had been a triumph. One of Denver's richest diners had praised his exceptional quality of beef, and an email had just arrived from a new supplier, another deal on the horizon. Untouchable, that's how Thomas felt. He knew the system inside and out, until two black SUVs without plates stopped in front of the entrance. Thomas frowned. The doors opened. 4 people stepped out. Leading them was Ethan Carter, clad in a charcoal suit, his presence as commanding as stone. At his side was Arthur Pendleton. Behind them, 2 federal agents, one FBI, one FDA. Thomas froze. "Good morning," Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud, but the entire restaurant fell silent. You're, Thomas stammered. "The man you dismissed last night," Ethan replied, a cold smile cutting across his face. "And today, the man here to take back the truth." Ethan walked straight to table 17, the same table where he had been cast aside as unworthy. He paused there for a moment, then slowly turned toward the back of the restaurant. Claire stood frozen menus in hand, her face pale with shock. Ethan met her eyes. No anger, no blame, only a steady, reassuring nod. Everything was about to change. Minutes later in Thomas's office, the FBI unrolled a warrant. Files were seized, computers extracted. Thomas thrashed against it, shouting desperate. He pointed at Claire, spitting accusations. "She set me up. She was helping me with the books. She knew everything." Ethan raised a hand. "Claire, could you step in here, please?" She walked in, her hands clasped tightly, trembling, but her eyes unbowed. "Is what Thomas says true?" Ethan asked, his voice low and steady. Claire swallowed hard. "No, I never agreed. He forced me. My brother is sick. I had no choice." Ethan gave a single nod. "Thank you." He turned to the agents. "You heard her?" And with that, Thomas Green was handcuffed and let out his shouts echoing through the stunned staff. Claire stood motionless. "You're not fired," Ethan said softly. "You're free." And in that moment, the life of a young waitress once crushed by shadows took its first step into the light. Claire stood frozen in the office, her hands clasped so tightly it felt like if she let go, her entire body would dissolve. Hours ago, she had been cornered, threatened, forced into silence. Now, the truth had been laid bare, and she was standing face to face with the man who had changed everything. Ethan turned toward her, his eyes softening, his voice deep but warm. "You did something most people wouldn't have the courage to do. You knew the risks, but you spoke up. And because of you, we didn't just save one restaurant. We may have saved the entire company from a nightmare." Claire's lips trembled, but no sound came out. Tears spilled quietly down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Recognition. She was finally being seen for who she was. Ethan nodded to Arthur, who stepped forward with a leather briefcase. He opened it, pulling out an official document stamped with the Ashcroft Group seal. His voice carried the gravity of a formal decree. "Claire Bennett, by the authority of Chairman Ethan Carter, Ashcroft Group hereby nullifies all so-called internal debts wrongfully imposed by Thomas Green and grants full medical support for Lucas Bennett, your brother, through a newly established fund, the Bennett Fund." Claire nearly collapsed to her knees. Her lips quivered. "No, this can't be real," she whispered. "You don't have to do this." Ethan stepped closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "I don't do it because I have to. I do it because you deserve it." The room went silent, and in that stillness Claire felt her life turn a corner she never thought possible. But Ethan wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," he said, his tone sharpening again. Arthur handed him another folder, thicker stamped, confidential. Ethan pulled out a small envelope embossed with the Ashcroft gold crest. He held it high and declared, "I am officially appointing Claire Bennett to a newly created role, Director of Ethics and Supply Chain Integrity at Ashcroft Group. You will oversee all frontline operations quality control and internal reporting, and you will report directly to me." The room fell silent. A few employees peered through the doorway, eyes wide. A financial officer beside Arthur gaped in disbelief, but only one person seemed unable to comprehend it at all. Claire stepped back, tears streaming. "No, I'm just a waitress." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, Claire. You're the only one who had the courage to speak the truth when every door was shut. You didn't wait for opportunity. You created it." Her heart pounded wildly. "But I don't have executive experience." "You have something more important," Ethan said firmly. "Conscience, instinct, and most of all, a reason to fight." Claire looked at him, then at Arthur. Both men, powerful, respected, were looking at her with absolute respect. She thought of Lucas, of the sleepless nights, of his fragile breaths through the ventilator, of all the dreams buried beneath medical bills and the grease-stained uniform she wore each night. And then from deep within her chest came a whisper. "Yes, I accept." Applause erupted from the hallway. Several employees had gathered there, having witnessed it all. And for the first time in months, they were smiling. Real smiles. Claire wiped her tears and accepted the appointment letter from Ethan's hand. The paper trembled heavy with both fear and hope. Ethan leaned close, his words as soft as a breeze. "Welcome to the light." That afternoon, the prestigious business journal, the Financial Sentinel, ran a headline across its front page. "Ashcroft. CEO exposes food poisoning. Scandal. Waitress becomes executive through a napkin note." Beneath the bold title was a photo of Claire, still in her worn server's uniform, her face stunned, standing between two men in suits while the world shifted around her. And at the bottom of the article, one line stood out. "Do the right thing even when no one is watching. That is what makes us human." Days after the shocking events at Ashcroft Prime, the storm in the media still hadn't calmed. Reporters swarmed around Claire Bennett, painting her as a symbol of quiet courage. They called her the heroine with worn-out shoes, the director from Table 17, the girl who used a napkin to bring down a rotten system. But for Claire, all the lights and headlines felt foreign. Her mornings hadn't changed. She still woke at 6. She still blended a nutritional shake for Lucas, still checked his medication and ventilator, still waited for the medical van to arrive with his IV treatments. Their apartment was still cramped, but now there was a new refrigerator in the kitchen, a specialized medical bed in Lucas's room, and on her desk lay an envelope stamped with the words, "Full scholarship, University of Colorado, economics, sponsored by the Bennett Fund." She looked at her brother, sleeping peacefully, his chest rising more steadily now, no longer straining for every breath. For the first time in 3 years, Claire felt she could breathe with him, slowly, safely. At Ashcroft Group headquarters, things had changed too. Claire's new office as Director of Ethics and Supply Chain Integrity wasn't on a glittering top floor, but on the 3rd, right next to Quality Control and HR. The walls weren't marble, the lights weren't crystal chandeliers, but there was a large corkboard covered with pinned notes and stories from employees across the chain. "Because of the medical support program, my mother is getting cancer treatment. Thank you for listening to those of us at the bottom. She answered my email at 10 p.m. I never thought anyone would care enough to read it. Claire read every single one, holding on to them as fuel for her heart. She wasn't a cold executive. She was someone who had once been trapped in the shadows. And because of that, she could see through the polish to find the people behind it. Ethan Carter had changed too. No longer the CEO who only appeared at shareholder meetings or on television features. He spent more time on the ground, speaking with chefs, delivery drivers, security guards. Sometimes employees spotted him sitting alone at a corner table, always near the kitchen, eating a simple bowl of soup, smiling at anyone who passed by. At the year-end board meeting, Ethan didn't open with profit reports. He opened with a single statement. Profit can be measured in numbers, but trust from servers, chefs, guards, and even customers. That is the foundation that keeps this empire standing. He paused, glancing toward the row where Claire sat, her eyes steady, her presence unshakable. And it all began with a napkin, and a young woman brave enough to believe someone would read it. Winter came slowly. Snow lay gently over Denver's streets. At a newly reopened Ashcroft Prime, now cleansed after the scandal, customers filled the tables again. But table 17 was left exactly where it had been. No longer next to the kitchen, no longer the worst seat in the house. Now it was kept as a symbol. On that table, encased in a small glass frame, a plaque read, "Here a server dared to share the truth, and a guest chose not to ignore it." No one had asked Claire to be a hero, but she had become one, simply by choosing what was right instead of what was easy. Some stories don't begin with thunder or a grand catastrophe. They begin with a kind glance, a glass of water set down without a word, a white napkin scribbled with trembling handwriting. And sometimes it's those smallest moments that ignite a change powerful enough to shake an empire. Claire Bennett's story was not just about a waitress becoming a director. It was a testament carved into the heart of someone who refused to surrender to despair. Proof that even when you're just another nameless soul at the last table in the room, you can still change the game entirely. Ethan Carter had gone searching for truth in a world polished with masks and false smiles. And in one fleeting moment of being treated like an ordinary man, he found something money could never buy: unconditional courage. And the most beautiful part was this: he didn't just notice it, he answered it, protected it, and amplified it. Claire and Ethan, weren't heroes in capes. They were two human beings, one searching to find his soul again, the other clinging to her last thread of hope. And somehow, they met at just the right moment, and together, they lit a flame. So, if you ever feel too small to make a difference, remember Claire, remember Table 17, and remember this: a single act of kindness, a timely warning, a message scrawled on a napkin, can be the beginning of a revolution.